France has another Prime Minister. It's the fifth in the space of 2 years. Sebastien Lecornu is a Macron loyalist who has been sworn in against the backdrop of violent anti-government protests over budget cuts and the political class. So, can the new Prime Minister finally bring stability to France? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, France's new Prime Minister, Sebastien Lecornu, has a huge task ahead of him. The unenviable challenge of coming up with a budget that can be agreed on by the majority of France's MPs in Parliament. It's already brought down his two predecessors as the country's public debt spirals out of control.
France is burning with anger. In Paris, thousands have taken to the streets as part of the Block Everything movement, protesting against President Emmanual Macron, the political elite, and planned public spending cuts. Lighting flares, building barricades, clashing with the police, and blocking transport links, bringing the country to a standstill.
People are fed up. It's been 8 years of enduring if we're only talking about Macron. But before that, we had Hollande, we had Sarkozy. People are fed up. We can't live anymore.
What's happening is truly outrageous. The government is telling us that there's a debt to repay, that it's catastrophic, and that we have no choice but to sacrifice ourselves, tighten our belts.
It was the opposition to the government's budget to curb public debt which saw the downfall of Prime Minister François Bayrou. Appointed to take on the role, and with it a spiralling debt issue, is Sebastien Lecornu, a close ally of President Macron. He's France's fifth Prime Minister in just 2 years. Macron views him as a fixer, but he has a $3.56 trillion national debt problem to mend.
We must fundamentally put an end to this double disconnect. The disconnect between the political situation and the disconnect with what our fellow citizens legitimately expect for their daily lives, the economic and social situation, and for their security. In short, this is what we are obviously tasked with.
Appointing the Conservative Lecornu risks alienating the centre-left Socialist Party, leaving Macron's government dependent on the far-right National Rally for parliamentary support. The opposition is already circling. The far left have already threatened another vote of no confidence, while the far right says it will back the budget, but only on its terms. Lecornu takes office facing a nation at boiling point. Can he push through the budget cuts and restore calm in France?
Well, let's bring in our guests who are all in France today. In Bordeaux, we have Bruno Jeanbart. Bruno is Deputy Managing Director at OpinionWay. That's a market research firm which conducts opinion polls in France. In Paris, the French capital, we have Nacira Guenif. Nacira is a professor of sociology and anthropology at Université Paris 8. And also in Paris, we have Peter Allen, a journalist specialising in French current affairs. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. Bienvenue. Peter, to you first of all. Forgive me if this sounds like a negative question to start off with, but who on earth would want to be French Prime Minister right now?
I don't think anybody would really want to be French Prime Minister at the moment. If you look at Emmanuel Macron, he's on to his seventh Prime Minister, well inside 9 years. I think that fact alone gives you a good indication as to why the current incumbent really has taken on a poison chalice. Sebastien Lecornu feels that he can make some efforts towards uniting the French Parliament and pushing through the bidding of his ultimate boss, who of course is Monsieur Macron. But I don't think it's just a new phenomenon, this idea that a prime minister has a thankless task. I think if you look at the whole of the Macron administration, prime ministers have been treated pretty badly, but not just by the electorate and by the French Parliament, but also by Emmanuel Macron himself. But of course, if you look at Emmanuel Macron's predecessors, the case hasn't been very different. It is a problem, I think, with the constitution of the Fifth Republic that we're meant to have some kind of prime ministerial government running alongside presidential government, but all of the power at the moment is with the president, and increasingly we see the prime minister acting as some kind of whipping boy, if that's the right expression, to the president. And again, now it's particularly difficult. We're coming towards the end of Emmanuel Macron's time in office. He has to end his time as president in 2027. They're only allowed 2 terms here in France. And one would imagine that Monsieur Lecornu will be here in power until 2027, but it's going to be a very rough ride indeed, Enda.
Thanks, Peter. Nacira, to you, why has President Macron turned to Lecornu? What does he see in this man? What does he expect from him?
Let's remind your viewers first that the Fifth Republic Constitution was written and implemented during the Algerian Independence War, anti-colonial war. And this is not random that Macron is using this kind of overpower frame in order to go all the way to 2027. And Lecornu is one of his closest collaborators that did all the dirty jobs for him. Let's put it that way. And beginning with dealing with one of the colonies, the French colonies, New Caledonia, Kanaki, in the Pacific Ocean. He did all the dirty job in order to keep this colony part of the French sovereignty. And Lecornu has been granted all kind of positions since then because of what he does. He will do whatever Macron desires or imposes on him, because he's not a real politician. He doesn't have a sense of the common good. What he has is a sense of what are the primary interests of Macron. So however he looks like, he's going to be able to talk and discuss with all parties in France, and the left and the right actually is only in charge because he is the man who does the dirty job for Macron.
Thank you, Nacira. Bruno, do you agree? Is that your reading of this relationship between President and Prime Minister, that Lecornu has been given this job because he does all the things that the President doesn't want to?
I think the fact that he's called from the president and that he has been minister since the beginning of the first mandate of Macron is one reason why he is there. But I think another reason is that is cause also from the Conservative Party, the Républicain, because he's a former guy from this party, and is also considered as on the center right, so being able to discuss with the Socialist Party. So that's, I think, why is the reason also why is there. And the question is, will he be able to do that? Bayrou didn't, the former prime minister didn't succeed to do that and to discuss with the socialist. We'll see if Lecornu is able to do that.
Bruno, Peter used the phrase a poison chalice. Do you think this is a dead-end job for Lecornu, that it's only a matter of a few months until he gets the push as well, same as Bayrou?
Obviously, when you are prime minister in the Fifth Republic and you don't have a majority in the parliament, it's a very difficult position. I mean, this system is made for having a majority. It's a very quiet system for prime minister when you have one. The only problem they have is the relationship with the president. Here it's the opposite. There's no problem of relationship with the president. There's a problem of relationship with the political groups in the parliament. So obviously it's difficult, but I mean, they have to. He has to try, and I guess he's not in a situation where he's thinking that it's a kind of poison to be there. I think he wanted to be there, and he's going to try to find this kind of agreement. Of course, he knows he's not going to be able to do a lot of things as a prime minister. But the main thing he has to try to do is to vote a budget.
Thank you, Bruno. Peter, to you, talk us through this relationship between Macron and Lecornu. He's a young guy, he's 39, but they are politically very, very close. They've known each other a long time. He is inner circle, really, inner sanctum of the Macron administration.
Yes, very much so. I agree with everything that's been said so far about him, and that points to this very close relationship with Monsieur Macron. If you look at Monsieur Lecornu, he's very much in the mould of an old-style Gaullist time server, the kind of minister who would have served very well in a cabinet ultimately presided over by Charles de Gaulle back in the day. He's an old-style conservative. His priorities are law and order. He's very reactionary, comes from a very Catholic background. He is an officer in the gendarmerie, a reservist. That's a fascinating fact about him. He's just the kind of person who might have been made an interior minister. Now, nothing in what I've just said points to him to knowing much about how modern economies work. And indeed, the kind of quite complicated liberal economic ideas that the real money man, the real old-school financier, Emmanuel Macron, has for France. And again, this suggests absolutely that he is somebody who has, Lecornu is somebody who has been appointed to do his master's bidding, to try and get through Emmanuel Macron's policies, especially his financial policies. It's all about the economy in the end, isn't it? You might not think so by looking at some opinion polls, when some people suggest that saving money and the economy isn't the priority for France. But as far as Emmanuel Macron is concerned, I would say it is. And he sees Lecornu as somebody who might be able to get some kind of compromise in Parliament, try to get some people from different factions on side to push through some policies so that Emmanuel Macron doesn't have to rely on 49.3, the feared clause in the constitution, which allows presidential government, the full-blown presidential government, if you like. But yes, I think that Lecornu probably would have made quite an effective interior minister, but as prime minister, he really is there just to do his master's bidding, I would say.
Thanks, Peter. You mentioned polling. I just want to go back to Bruno. On the issue of polling, Bruno, where would you put Macron at the moment? What did the French public think of him?
Well, his popularity rating is very low. It's between 20% and 25% only. It's the lowest that we had since he was elected. It's even worse than it was during the Yellow Vest movement period. But I would say that it's a quite usual situation for a second mandate of a French president. We had the same with Mitterrand after 3 years of his second mandate, the same with Chirac, and now we have the same with Macron. Clearly, there is a kind of difficulty for the French president to rule their second mandate when they are re-elected, and it's the case for Macron.
So, Nacira, all this pressure on the president of France, and there's someone in the wings who wants to be president, Marine Le Pen and her sidekick Jordan Bardella. What have they been saying about the Lecornu situation?
Well, that's interesting because we have come to learn that Lecornu has been meeting Le Pen and Bardella some months ago as the go-between of the president, as I just explained. And now they are kind of already turning on him and saying that this doesn't give him any insurance that they will vote in favor of whatever he presents. So they want to put pressure on Lecornu so that they get more and more, and so that to some extent, and this is something that we've already observed, the National Front or rally doesn't have to be in power in order to govern. This has already happened with the last immigration law that was very much along the lines of what the National Front's wants in terms of immigration in France. And it was voted by the central bloc, the one that is close to Macron. So I guess that Lecornu will have to go through this kind of game again about making sure that Le Pen, Bardella, and all the National Front is in favor of what they want to implement and what they want to get to the parliament in terms of new laws, so that they don't even have to get to be in the government to govern.
Nacira, do you think National Rally is a viable alternative if Lecornu fails very quickly?
I would say that in terms of the spirit of France right now, it could be a viable alternative in terms of votes, but it would be a disaster in terms of the French democracy and what it pretends to stand for. So again, I think that if they have this kind of figures that we observed during the last legislative, the snap legislative elections that were put in place by Macron in June 24, if they get the kind of figures that they had, again, there will be, or there might be, some sort of a resistance from the French society against their possible winning and getting to be the next government. But all this is very blurred right now because of the kind of mobilizations that the popular mobilizations that we see on the streets, and because of the reluctance to give any kind of ground to the French government, to the new government of Lecornu, and especially to Macron, because he's very low in the polls.
Thanks, Nacira. Peter, let's address the big debt elephant in the room. France is skint. At what point did the French public accept this and start working with their politicians, as opposed to what we're seeing on TV, block everything, strikes, general strikes, all of the anger we're seeing on the streets? At what point do you think the French public will realise we're in an awful mess?
Well, there's nothing new under the sun. The French have been in an awful mess financially for decades. Year after year, you hear about great hopes for the French liberal economy coming forward and almost implementing what would be France's Thatcher moment. Margaret Thatcher came into Britain in the 1980s, very controversially, reformed so much about the economy, took on the unions, whatever, whether you detest her, as many do, whether you like her. She brought about those kind of liberal economic reforms that's never really happened in France. I think the most powerful politician who thought he would do all this was Nicolas Sarkozy. He was described as the Gallic Margaret Thatcher. I remember that very, very well. It's about the time that I arrived in France. Look what happened to him. He's a convicted criminal now. He's facing proper prison time. I think he's being sentenced next week. So that's gone. So there's nothing new about this. And again, we go back to the opinion polls, which are always fascinating. And some I was looking at very recently suggest if you look at the priorities of the French people, you see law and order, you see lots of issues like that, but you seldom see anybody worrying too much about the national debt, about those kind of rather abstract figures that we hear about all the time. Do any of us really understand what 14% of GDP debt really means? Do we really understand what almost 6% of GDP, the national deficit, is at the moment? I would say, having spoken to lots of demonstrators, as I did out on the streets of Paris last Wednesday, and I'll speak to a lot more this Thursday because there's more demonstrations, they don't really buy all those abstract figures. They say, look, this is a country that can afford to send missiles into Libya, that can afford to send weapons to prosecute a genocide in Gaza or whatever. These billions of euros spent on these kind of horrific wars, and yet they still complain about not being able to balance the books so as to fund hospitals, to fund schools or whatever. So the answer to your question, in my opinion, Enda, is I don't think most French people are too fussed about these great abstract crises involving national debt,
Thanks, Peter.
the deficit, etc., etc.
Thanks, Peter. Let's bring Bruno in. Bruno, just on the issue then, when you're doing your polling and you're speaking to people, does the national debt and France's money problems crop up? Or do people just very much selfishly care about number one, cost of living, my lifestyle?
It depends on the period. I mean, at the end of the 2000 years, during the campaign of 2007, it was a huge issue in the campaign. It has disappeared totally since François Hollande and during the first mandate of Emmanuel Macron. What we see in the last month is a coming back of this issue in the public opinion. It's increasing, but it's not the first issue. Clearly, people are more concerned about crime, about immigration, and about cost of living, as you said. So it's not the most important issue, and that's one of the problems of the government. He wants to tackle that. He wants to try to fix that, but it's not the main problem that the French are thinking they're facing. So it's, of course, more difficult. And the other point is that even when you have people who are concerned by this problem, if there is no agreement in the society on how you should tackle it and on which part of the budget you should do reduce spendings. And that's also the problem that we face today.
Thanks, Bruno. Nacira, we keep seeing on the news and in the newspapers about Bloquons 2, Block Everything, this protest group that's sprung up very recently. How much problems do you think they will create in the coming weeks and months for the French government?
Yeah, obviously none. I mean, this is not the first time that people want to block France, and Macron doesn't care. But just to go back to what was said, I think that the neoliberal policies have been implemented in France since 1983. I mean, France is part of the neoliberal bloc. No doubt about this. This is precisely what has led everybody to what we are facing now. And the people are not just discarding the question of the debt. They don't think that the way the state is dealing with that is the proper way. And by the way, the people who are on the street are also saying that they are willing to address the question of the debt, but also in relation to their own daily problems. And their daily problems are not crime or immigration. I'm sorry, this is not at the highest position in their polls. What they think about is that the rich people in France, because of the neoliberal policies implemented for almost 40 years, they don't pay their share, their fair share. This is what they are asking for. And so this is what is bringing people to the streets. And this has been going on for years, and Macron is the main responsible politician for this. I mean, he has implemented all kinds of reforms related to labor, to retirement, to health, to education. Yet every time makes it more difficult for regular people to have a decent and ordinary living. So this is what is going to happen for the next month. But whatever happens on the street, the repression, the way the police is always attacking demonstrators and peaceful demonstrators, this is what I mean, shows that they don't care.
Thanks, Nacira. Peter, someone said to me the other day, France is a republic that behaves like a monarchy, and the UK is a monarchy that behaves like a republic. There's a lot to be said into that, isn't there? And a lot to be read. Is Macron behaving like a monarch?
Well, certainly. I certainly would agree with that. And that has everything to do, again, with the nature of the Fifth Republic constitution. It was set up as a stopgap measure to stop France getting involved in a civil war over the future of Algeria in 1958. It created this monarchical figure, really, somebody who literally lives in a palace, who has the whole security state at his fingertips. He controls the army. Ultimately, he has his finger on the nuclear button. I keep saying he because it's always been a man. And Emmanuel Macron has certainly fitted into that role that was envisaged by Charles de Gaulle. Emmanuel Macron is quite happy to rule by presidential decree. He's only won 2 elections in his entire life. He's only taken part in 2 elections in his entire life. One was to become president of France. One was to be re-elected as president of France. He's not even visited the French Parliament. I think he has complete disdain for the French Parliament, really. He has to go through the motions trying to pick these 4 guy prime ministers to try and do his bidding for him in Parliament, and they're always failing at the moment. So yes, there's no doubt about it that the Fifth Republic Constitution sets up this hugely powerful presidential figure. Macron was called Jupiter. That was his nickname at the beginning of his administration, and he hasn't really moved away from that image at all. It is a huge fault, a huge endemic fault in the whole setup of the Fifth Republic, the current iteration of Republican France, and that's why you get so many demonstrators who are out on the streets of left and right calling for Sixth Republic.
Bruno in Bordeaux, thank you, and Nacira and Peter Allen in Paris, thank you all. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.